Hello, my name is Emily Katz, and my rewilding project is to incorporate a system of rewilding roofs throughout the city of Providence. So why did I select Providence, Rhode Island as the location for this proposal? This is the city where I live. I've lived in Providence for the last 4 years, and I am a Rhode Island native. I was born and raised in Rhode Island, which, for those of you who don't know, is the smallest state in the United States. It's up in the northeast corner of the country. In addition to my connection with Providence, I think that this is a great city for this proposal because they are supportive of sustainable practices. There is a Department of Sustainability for the city, and they continue to work on sustainable initiatives on a daily basis. There are a number of efforts going on, but one in particular, a few years back, they installed a trash skimmer in the Providence River, which has been long polluted. And there's also Save the Bay, which is an organization that is working to clean up the Providence River and the Narragansett Bay. The city also has a climate justice plan with the goal of becoming an equitable, low carbon, and climate resilient city. And I think that my Rewilding Roofs proposal will help us to achieve this goal. Providence is also suffering from a housing crisis. There are a lot of people who want to move here, and there's just not enough affordable housing. So what the city is doing is continuing to develop and create new housing structures, but this is at the cost of eliminating green spaces in the area. So this is definitely something that we're hoping the Rewilding Roofs project will be able to mitigate, where we're still going to be able to have green spaces and leave room for nature while continuing to develop in the area. So let's talk about some of the issues that our city is currently facing. One, the floods in the area have absolutely increased within recent years. I can talk a little bit more about that in the subsequent slides after this one. We're going to go into more detail about each of these issues, but I just want to give you a high-level overview, which is that the city is experiencing increasing floods. The urban heat effect is definitely taking an impact on our city. It's definitely a lot hotter in the city than in the surrounding areas. And as I had mentioned, there is a lack of green blue space. Even without the additional development that's going on, we don't have a lot of green and blue spaces to begin with, even though there is a river. And I'll have some maps on throughout this PowerPoint as well, but there's a river that runs directly through our city, but only in recent years have they started actually planting around that river. It's been there's a lot of concrete going on. So this is definitely something that we'd like to improve. Okay. So I got these images and these figures from riskfactor.com. As we're going through the PowerPoint, I did attach all of the links to where I found the sources on each slide. So if we're looking at this map here, we can see that this area right here, this little outline here, that's all downtown Providence. So you can see that there's a lot of major and severe risk of flooding in this area. This over here, this is Providence as well. This is actually right where I live. So that's how I know that there's a lot of flooding in the area. But all of these spaces, even though we do have some trees in the area, there's just not a lot of actual soil exposure. Pretty much everything is concrete here. So I think that definitely contributes to the severe risk of flooding that we're experiencing. This map shows us about the heat waves, and you can see that in recent years, the likelihood of a 3 or more day heat wave is increasing pretty dramatically. Obviously, the entire city of Providence is at a severe risk of heat waves, and even the surrounding areas. So this is definitely something that we're hoping to mitigate with this proposal. And here is a image I got just directly from Google Maps, and I just decided to point out some specific areas here. But if we just look at the whole of Providence, this is the entire border here. And just at a glance, it does look gray. There are some more green areas over here. There's a green area over here. There's a little green area over here, but there is just a solid block where there's just very few trees. And I did kind of point out that this right here, Roger Williams Park, is definitely the largest accessible green space in the city, without a doubt. It is beautiful over there, but there's actually not even that much biodiversity happening. There is, but there could definitely be more. But that's very far away from the center of downtown, which from an aerial view, you're really just not seeing much green at all. This area is a little bit more green because Brown University makes sure to keep nature alive. But what's outside of that university realm, you can see that it's definitely been neglected. This green space over here, just pointing out, this is a golf course. So this isn't a flourishing biodiverse space. This is a cemetery. So even these areas that look green, they're not really time that you could realistically go and spend the day and be able to just connect with nature. They're businesses, or they're a cemetery, which is nice, but maybe not the most accessible location. So why are green and blue spaces important? For one, they do protect us against hazards. So those issues that we were talking about in terms of the flooding, in terms of the heat waves, having more green and blue spaces in the city will definitely mitigate that. Plants do soak up the rain, which decreases the stormwater runoff. Trees provide shade, which keeps the temperatures down. And evaporation and transpiration in plants create a cooling effect in the city as well. Not only that, but having green and blue spaces for people to interact with is essential for mental health and eudaimonic happiness. There are studies that I learned about in this class that speak to that. But in general, we just want to make sure, and I think that COVID as well brought that to a lot of people's minds, is that our connection with nature really does have an impact. So we want to make sure that as development in the city continues, that we're still leaving space and we're not completely disconnecting ourselves from the rest of the world and just saying, people are separate and nature's in a totally different area. We want to find a way to coexist together. So why is rewilding important? Everything that exists today exists because nature created it, or humans have found a way to manipulate something that nature created. So rewilding is giving nature that space to continue to grow and to continue to evolve without human intervention. So I think also it can help people to see these ecosystems and kind of relating back to the eudaimonic happiness, just understanding that we're all a part of the same planet and we all need to respect each other and respect nature as well. So why are there so few green or blue spaces in this area? At the end of the day, this image I took right here is right near where I live. And it's obviously a very large, well, not very large, but it's a space of just mowed grass. And when I looked up, this area also used to be a sunflower farm. But the reason it's not anymore is because it's planned development at this point. They're going to build a multi-purpose building here that has stores and housing, and that's very common in our area. A lot of the development is focused around that. So it's not unexpected, but it's also unfortunate because I look at this and I think this would be a perfect place for a forest in the city to be able to bring some biodiversity and to enhance that connectedness with nature. But at the end of the day, nothing's going to stop this from becoming a building or a set of buildings, a little building complex over here. And the main reason for that is because having a forest here isn't going to generate revenue. Having a building where people are paying rent and there are businesses, that is going to generate revenue for the owner of this space. And so I think that we need to get a little bit creative about what can we do with the gray spaces that we already have? How can we create this nature coexistence while still continuing to develop in the area? So the punchline here is that incorporating green spaces onto the roofs of buildings and parking lots will significantly increase the area for which nature can live within our city borders. So here's another map of an area of downtown. As we can see, there's a couple little areas with green spaces, but even if we were to plant all the biodiverse plants or just put a bunch of logs there and just leave these areas completely alone, they're very small, they're not connected, and that's really not great for rewilding because animals need to be able to have a larger space that's connected that they can access in order to actually build these thriving ecosystems. So anyway, so if we look at this area, we can see that there are some pretty large buildings though. There's this right here is the Providence Place Mall. This is the Rhode Island Convention Center, and this is Amica Mutual Pavilion. The reason I'm pointing these out is just that these are large buildings with a lot of roof area where we could potentially put a rewilding roof on top of them. But not only those, there's also all these other buildings and parking lots here that could also have these rewilding roofs. So the idea here would be to create a system of roofs. So this way, when you're looking at the city, you see green. When birds are flying over the city, they see places for them to land and where they'd be welcome to land rather than a sea of gray. Here is another image of downtown Providence. So this right here, let me try to connect them. This is more about this sort of general area. So we're kind of zooming in a little bit over here. These right here, I've put these little green cutouts here to show these are all of the single level parking lots that exist in Providence. So these are all completely open air spaces that are just reserved for one floor of parking. So if we were to build an infrastructure on top of these parking lots that is green, has a green roof, that's something that would give nature a lot more area in downtown to be able to, you know, nest and to pollinate flowers and to just exist and not have to deal with humans and cars, and it kind of be out of the way and them to be able to have their own space. And not even just talking about these parking lots, but you can clearly see these are all buildings with roofs. So when, you know, these images are really just to show that there's plenty of space for nature in Providence. We just have to get creative if we want to avoid tearing down the structures that already exist here. So here is a mock-up. This is just an image of just sort of the general idea that we're sort of getting at, which is this is a roof right here. There are trees coming up from the ground floor, from just the regular street level. And you're able to see that, you know, animals could be climbing on those trees. And when they get to the top, they're able to see that, oh, there's this whole green space for them to eat and nest and everything that they need to do up there. So this is showing to demonstrate how passive rewilding can happen in an urban area with the use of green roofs, especially these interconnected ones, right? So this would be an idea of that this is where one roof ends and this is where another roof begins. And so especially for birds or, you know, animals that are able to jump from one roof to the next, you know, that's almost like the idea of being in a large meadow, right? They should be able to look out and see that there are other green spaces that they can get to. You know, obviously the ones that can fly are going to get there a little easier, but I think that this would still make wildlife feel more at home in the city if when they're able to get to a top of a roof, they see, oh, there's other roofs as well. There's other spaces where that look welcoming. This also goes along with the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Even though that was found that right outside of city areas are the ideal spaces for biodiversity and thriving ecosystems, I think that this would achieve a similar effect because we're having nature up on a roof. So it's not quite constantly interacting with humans, but it's still very close to humans. So you're still getting those noises from the city, but nature is also having its own space that's undisturbed. Also, a very important concept for these rewilding roofs is that these are going to require little to no maintenance. The idea is that you set them up. Most of these roofs are just going to not even be visited by people. They're just going to be reserved for nature. Most of the roofs in this area aren't accessible anyways. So we're just establishing an area for nature to exist and leaving it alone entirely. So let's talk about some different types of green roof options. There's really only two that I'm going to discuss because only two are really relevant to the topic of rewilding. So an extensive green roof is just a basic green roof. It doesn't have any sort of an irrigation system, and that's really what we're wanting. We're looking to plant drought resistant plants. And so we don't need an irrigation system underneath these roofs in order for those plants to survive ideally. So the one disadvantage with this is that typically the extensive green roofs don't allow for larger root systems. So we would want to work with the green roof company to try to say, how deep, how heavy, how much soil and area can we possibly give to these plants without requiring an irrigation system set up as well. So that's sort of the idea of an extensive green roof. And a brown roof is very similar, but the main difference is that we don't plant anything. We just set up the area on top, and then we just let nature visit it as it needs, and that every plant and anything that ends up on that roof will end up there because something in nature put it there. And that really allows these roofs to, I think it's a little closer to the concept of rewilding, because aside from just setting up this level dirt area on top of the roof, humans really aren't interacting with it. The major disadvantage to this is that people put up this roof, and in terms of visual how it looks, it's not going to look great. It's going to look like a dirt roof until eventually things start growing there. So I think what we're likely going to want to do, since this is a city, is a combination of both. And it's just going to depend on, what roof, how much space we're working with, and how much money, each business is willing to contribute, how much money we have to contribute as well. So let's talk about the major hurdles. Obviously, I've just mentioned a little bit costs. Sadly, these roofs are not free. We have to actually build them, which means materials and labor. So we're going to talk about those and how we can potentially mitigate some of those costs. And next is the human nature connectedness. Obviously, we are talking a little bit about one of the main things we're wanting to get out of this is that eudaimonic happiness and people to be able to find purpose in their lives by having that connection with nature. It's difficult with a rewilding roof because the whole idea is that humans need to leave it alone, right? So we don't want to have these, we do want the roofs to exist, so this way nature can visit them freely and not feel like humans are all up in their space. But we also want to make sure that the people who live in the city have a way to view these roofs and still feel that connection with nature, rather than being inside a glass building and looking out and seeing some roofs may not have the same effect as actually being in that space and being close to that biodiversity. So we need to establish a human nature connectedness in this form. So let's talk about the cost. Typically, the extensive green roofs are going to cost between $12 to $20 per square foot. And then the intensive green roofs, which is the ones that would have the irrigation system, is typically cost between $30 and $100 per square foot. So we're going to have to figure out for our purposes, because really the reason we want to make sure that we're able to have some more complex root systems is just to increase the biodiversity and to hopefully to be able to have some sort of bushes grow there that can also create shade on those roofs. Because I think just a plain open grassy roof is better than a gray roof, but I think that if we're able to have some plants and some things that are able to provide shade and shelter for animals, that's just going a step further towards being able to uphold those ecosystems. So in terms of pricing, if we're looking at a roof space that's about 200,000 square feet, which I was trying to find the total square footage of the roof of the Providence Place Mall, it looked like it was going to be anywhere from 200 to 600,000 square feet. So we're just using this as just a basic example here. So that green roof would cost about $4 million. And to put it in perspective, the annual taxes of the Providence Place Mall are currently around 1 million. And actually, I was reading that it's almost looking like they might be increasing that to like 25 million a year. So hoping that doesn't happen for them, but also hoping that this 4 million is sort of a drop in the bucket, and that it's something that they would be willing to pay for. And I'll talk more about how we can sell this idea to them and what initiatives it would have for them. The average roof size for businesses in the area is probably 2,000 square feet or less. So the expected cost of a green roof for them would be about $40,000. So how can we offset these costs? The main proposal that I'm making is that we set up a strategic agreement with the companies for materials, labor, and consulting. So really what this is going to take is we're going to have to figure out what are the top cost drivers of this project, seeing that we don't want to just have one green roof in one place. We want this network of green roofs. What can we do so this way when we have a bigger project that's costing in the millions, we can have some sort of agreement, so this way these buildings that would really only need green roofs that cost in the tens of thousands, what can we do to lower those prices? Maybe our like bigger green roofs are, and what can we just come up with in general, so this way maybe places that we're getting materials from, we can get a reduced rate on that, since we're ordering in bulk and since we're planning to order in bulk for the next few years as we continue the development on these roofs. So yes. Another thing is to work with volunteers to help with construction and planting. This would obviously save money on labor, but also it offers an opportunity for greater connection to the city and with nature for those who do volunteer, and it can kind of help with that human nature connectedness as we're setting things up, and as this project unfolds, people having the opportunity to work on these roofs, I think would be a great connection there. And then also providing incentives for business owners to add green roofs to their building. I think that the city is absolutely going to have to provide some form of advertisement. And I think it makes perfect sense anyways, because we're going to want to advertise that we have these green roofs, right? So we're going to want to have pictures on the Providence City website that talk about that show these green roofs, that show these aerial views. And I think it would be really easy to just add some tool tips into those images where you scroll over one of the roofs and it just gives you the information about that business. So hopefully that would be incentive to get people to want to build these green roofs, is that, hey, you're getting free promotion from the city if you do so. For any tourist that's coming in, they're going to be able to see that. So yes, how can we maintain rewilding and offer that human to nature connection, given that rewilding requires little to no human intervention? So what I'm thinking here is that we would use an example like the Providence Place Mall, which is already a place where people can go into at any time of the day. That's already an open space. It's already accessible. You can get onto the roofs of the Providence Place Mall now today at any time if you want to. So if we were to set up a green roof here that was a little bit more human accessible, where, you know, there's benches, there's a little walking path, we use this as kind of the roof where you're able to look out and see all the other roofs and also still be in that rich biodiverse environment. And then I think what we would do is set up some sort of requirement for these businesses that will be accessible, that say, you know, you still need to leave certain amount of space for rewilding. But other than that, it can be it can be accessible to people if you want, especially if it's a business that maybe wants to put a couple tables, like a restaurant, you know, that's fine, you can do that, but then just make sure that there is still some space where you know, there's some biodiverse flowers or whatever it may be, grasses. So yeah. And then another thing would be to establish other lookout points, even if they're not on the top of a roof itself. There are plenty of different areas in the city where you can go and get a beautiful view of the skyline or even just some of the buildings downtown. So if we can establish those lookout points and recommend them to people, and then make sure that those areas are biodiverse, right? So if we're from a park or somewhere else, just make sure that we do have some form of nature in that area, so you can look out and see all these different roofs with the green roofs and nature and flowers and animals and all that stuff, but also still feel that connection because you've also got that right next to you where you're looking. So that's what we're thinking there. So now we want to talk about some of the potential partners. So building green roofs, I looked up, you know, what people have already done in cities in Rhode Island, and it looks like what we really need are architects, green roof consultants, builders, and planters. So one potential partner is Apex Green Roofs. They have an extensive portfolio of building green roofs in New England, which, for those of you who don't know, that is the northeastern section of the United States, and Rhode Island is within there. There's like 5 other states. So and they've also done multiple projects in Rhode Island as well. So they're used to using the types of plants that we would need. And they're clearly, I just took this image directly from their website. These are all different examples. Obviously, there's a ton of biodiversity, just not only in each of these green roofs, but apart from each other. So there's a lot of variation of what we could do there. And then another potential partner is the Down City Design. So this is actually a nonprofit community design studio that builds permanent amenities around Providence. So they have architect consultants there. So what we're thinking is that we could use Apex Green Roofs as the consultant and use the volunteers from Down City Design, as well as other volunteers from the city, to help drive down the labor costs. And as I had mentioned earlier, this will also give those people involved a greater connection to the city and to these roofs. So now we're just getting down to the action plan. So on the next couple slides, I'm going to go through the exact steps that we'd want to take in order to accomplish this. So first, we want to obtain city approval for this. So we are going to want to submit this proposal to the Providence Department of Sustainability, interview stakeholders. Obviously, for the sake of this project, our main requirement is that rewilding is involved, right? But that, in addition to, we want to mitigate those issues that we mentioned in one of the earlier slides, including the flooding, the heat, and the increase in blue-green spaces. But there may be other requirements that the city has that we are going to need to include, and we're going to need to adjust this plan to accommodate those. We also want to determine any budgetary constraints. How much money can the city actually put towards this versus how much is going to have to come directly from the businesses that are getting the green roofs? And then we're going to want to begin to identify the top cost drivers. So this way we can figure out some possible partnerships for strategic agreements. Then in step 2, we're going to establish the locations. We're going to talk to Brookfield Properties, which is the owner of the Providence Place Mall. We're going to talk to ASM Global, which is the owner of the Rhode Island Convention Center and the Amica Mutual Pavilion, to see if they'd be interested in these green roofs, since they have some of the larger roof space in Providence. And our goal would be to obtain approval at one of these sites. And then we would, of course, interview the stakeholders, these actual owners, and those who work at the site, and refine our requirements further. Then moving on to step 3, we're going to assemble our building team. So we're going to connect with Apex Green Roofs for consulting. We're going to connect with Down City Design. We may need to reach out to another architect if they're not available. We may have to find some more volunteers elsewhere, but this is where we're going to iron all of those details out. And then we're going to finalize our budget and timeline from there. And then once again, adjust our requirements, obtain final approval from all stakeholders. And finally, we're going to move on to the implementation. So we're going to begin building these green roof infrastructure on these selected buildings. We're going to identify the lookout areas where the roofs are visible throughout the city. We're going to finalize our plant list for those that we actually are planting. We may incorporate some brown roofs, so that may not be necessary if we do that, but we're probably going to plant some things to get started. So this way we, you can kind of showcase the general idea of what things are going to look like over time. And then we're going to continue our strategic agreement discussions to establish a process for this system of green roofs throughout the city. And we're definitely thinking to target businesses, although maybe we'll also be able to do housing structures as well. But we're thinking that in terms of how we'd be able to promote this by using like a Providence, like as a way for the businesses to be promoted on the website, there might be more incentive there. So that's just where we're thinking, but open to anything going forward. And here's just a timeline. So what I'm thinking is that this project would take about 16 months. We're leaving about 6 months thinking that the discussion with the building owners are probably going to take some time and to get those contracts approved. Definitely a good amount of time to assemble those building teams and a good amount of time for the strategic agreement. But thinking the construction and planting would probably be able to be completed in about 4 months. And I did structure this timeline so this way the planting would start in around April, because I think that's likely when it would need to start. So we're thinking probably a year to obtain approvals, permits, and assemble the team, and then 4 months for actual construction and planting. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to my proposal. Feel free to contact me with any questions, and have a great day. Thank you.